Hi, and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's Game of Thrones Season 7 Vague Predictions. So this video is just where I throw out some bare bones predictions of what I think is going to happen in Season 7 of Game of Thrones. Every year I like to do a series of detailed prediction videos on what I think is going to happen in the upcoming season of Game of Thrones, but I want to be clear, this is not what this video is for, as I'm going to wait until we get more news about Season 7 before making any such videos. This video is just my vague impression of where I think the storylines in Season 7 might be headed in a very broad sense, just based off of what we've seen on the show so far and where things were left in Season 6. So I have to give a spoiler warning for Game of Thrones up to the end of Season 6. If you haven't seen all of Season 6, you may not want to watch this video, otherwise some things will be spoiled for you. So, Season 6 has moved beyond the storylines in the books, but there were still some lingering story threads from the books still to be told, such as Arya's story, which was a bit behind, and plus Season 6 was swinging back around to tell some storylines from Book 4, such as the King's Moot with the Iron Islands. And we finally got Balon's death, which happened in Book 3. However, by the end of Season 6, the show has now moved well beyond what has been revealed in the books, and more than that, has become an entirely separate entity that can no longer be judged based off of the books. Although there are some events in Season 6 that we know are also going to occur in future books, such as the whole Hold the Door incident, but for the most part, we have no idea which events are being created just for the show, or which ones are based off of the information George R. R. Martin gave the show runners on what he was planning to do with his final 2 books. But it's fair to say that the show is taking its own direction from now on, and although they still plan on ending in the same place, what the show does is likely to be very, very different than what the books do, especially compared to earlier seasons, so they can no longer be used as a gauge to tell what will happen in the show. And indeed, in many cases, I feel the books need to be disregarded, as the show is now its own separate entity. So this makes predicting the events of Season 7 really difficult, but there are a few vague impressions I was thinking of, so let me spit some of those out. So, going region by region, we'll start with the north. This is a hard one to pin down, as with the threat of the Boltons out of the way, it's hard to say where the conflict will lie. The natural progression would be to turn more towards the White Walkers, who are setting up to be the main antagonists for the end of the series, who we saw decimate Hardhome and the Three-Eyed Raven's cave. However, I think it's a bit too early for an all-out conflict with them, and I think this will be reserved for Season 8. As I do believe Season 7 will focus more on the infighting in Westeros, which will reach a height with Daenerys arriving in Westeros. However, I do think the White Walker threat will be explored more this season than it has in any other season previous, and I do believe by the end of Season 7 they will be south of the Wall. Now, how exactly this happens, I'm not sure. One of the more popular theories is that they will bring the Wall down, and while I don't rule this possibility out altogether, I tend to lean more away from that and think they will find another way to circumvent the Wall. It's been suggested that since Bran was marked in Season 6 that allowed the White Walkers to overrule the magic that was protecting the Three-Eyed Raven's cave, that the same mark would allow the White Walkers to circumvent the Wall's magic if Bran was at the Wall. And I certainly hope that that isn't the case, because that would make Bran the biggest fuck up in history. I mean, it's bad enough what he did to the cave. If he were to do the same thing to the Wall, that would make him the harbinger of doom. So I tend to lean away from that and think the White Walkers will find some other way of getting past the Wall. However, to be clear, I don't think this will happen until the end of the season. We do know that Bran is headed to the Wall, so I think it's possible to get some more scenes with him and Dolorous Edd at Castle Black. However, I'm still entirely uncertain what Bran's ultimate goal will be, as he's going to be more concerned with warning people about the upcoming White Walker invasion and trying to find a way to stop it. As Cold Hands Benjen pointed out, he is now the Three-Eyed Raven, so that makes me think he'll want to keep away from the public eye, as most people will be more concerned with his position as heir to House Stark, which I could even see some opportunists trying to use him to dethrone Jon Snow in favor of an actual male Stark heir, even if he is handicapped. But I think Bran is going to avoid all of that, but will want to talk to Jon because there's still that R plus L equals J reveal to deal with, which he'll want to share with Jon. And I think that'll have more significance than simply Jon being a Targaryen, but will be significant in Jon being the chosen one meant to defeat the White Walkers, and Bran will be more concerned with that. So I think it's possible Bran may even travel to Winterfell, but I'm not entirely certain about that. I think it could just as likely as he hides at Castle Black and stays away from the public eye and wants to be closer to the White Walker threat, and perhaps he sends for Jon to meet him there. I'm not sure. So concerning Jon and Sansa's storyline, I think their Season 7 storyline will mostly be dealing with internal threats rather than external ones. As I mentioned, the Boltons are defeated and the North is united behind them. I don't think they're going to face much of a threat from the Lannisters, as they're going to have their hands full down south, and I don't think the White Walkers will get south of the Wall until Season 8. So I think the Winterfell storyline in Season 7 will be more about Littlefinger and him trying to sow seeds of distrust between Sansa and Jon and keep tugging on that cord until something comes of it. I also believe that Brienne will return to the North in Season 7 and will be involved in aiding Sansa, as she doesn't really trust Littlefinger either and may be a voice of reason. So I think in the North we won't get any huge battles that will mostly concern politics. As far as Daenerys' invasion and how that will affect the North, the one possibility I think exists is that Tyrion might be sent north to seek an alliance with them, as Tyrion already knows both Jon Snow and Sansa. While a lot of people are thinking about a marriage proposal between Daenerys and Jon, I'm not sure if that's going to happen, and if it does, I don't think it will be until Season 8. What I think is a possibility is that Tyrion proposes that he and Sansa resume their marriage in order to form an alliance with Daenerys and the Starks, which of course Littlefinger isn't going to like one bit and is going to convince Sansa not to go for it. And ultimately, I think Jon's going to be more concerned with the White Walkers than dealing with Daenerys and just send Tyrion away, and they won't have any true dealings until Season 8. Now, Tyrion, we know from earlier, doesn't consider the White Walkers a serious threat, so he's not really going to be with Jon on this. But this is all just wild speculation, as I think it would be really cool to see Tyrion in the North again under these new conditions, but I could be totally and completely wrong about that. So let's move down further south, and first let me touch on the Riverlands, as I'm not sure we'll get much of that this season. I think with the death of Walder Frey and his sons, the Tullys might take advantage and regain control of the Riverlands and overthrow Frey rule. I think the Brotherhood without banners will help with this. Now, there was a line in Season 6 where Beric Dondarrion mentioned the White Walker threat, and many had taken this line to mean that the Brotherhood are immediately heading north. In fact, many had expected them to be north by the end of Season 6. But personally, I don't think Dondarrion was just talking about his end goal as a follower of R'hllor, because they're all concerned about the Great Others, who is the White Walkers, and that's where their eye is mostly. But other indications I think make it clear that their primary goal is still to secure the Riverlands, so I actually don't see them heading north until Season 8, and believe they will be in the Riverlands and Season 7, helping to ensure Tully rule and stabilize that region. And again, I don't think there will be much Lannister intervention, as they will have their hands full, and I think most of the scenes we get in the Riverlands will be centered around the Hound as the main viewpoint character, who will of course be with the Brotherhood. I also think it's possible that Melisandre will join this storyline, and she will be the primary force that pushes them back up north by the end of the season. I also think that Arya will meet briefly with the Brotherhood at the start of the season to help them overthrow the remaining Freys, and we get the Arya and the Hound reunion, but that's just my guess. So Arya is a whole nother ball of wax, as there's a lot of speculations where she will be headed in Season 7, where many seem to believe she will be heading north to reunite with her brother and sister, where I am of the very strong mind that she will in fact head south to King's Landing to try to take care of the only two names remaining on her list, Cersei and the Mountain. Many people point to the fact that she told Jack and Hagar, "I'm Arya Stark of Winterfell and I'm going home," to mean she's returning to Winterfell, but that's not how I interpreted it. I think home simply meant to Westeros, and her proclamation of her being Arya of Winterfell was just meant to show she reclaimed her identity and isn't no one, but I believe her top priority is to finish up her list, Arya's list, as we saw the very first thing that she did was to go to the Twins to kill Walder Frey. So I would argue if her goal was to return to Winterfell, she would have done it already, but instead her main priority is clearly to finish up her list. Now many suggest that she might become distracted and decide to take a detour up north once she learns of what's going on with Jon and Sansa, but I doubt it. I think she's going straight to the King's Landing to finish off her list. But then again, I could be wrong, but that's just where I'm heavily leaning towards. As all the dialogue between her and Lady Crane about anger and the need for revenge being the driving force, I believe was foreshadowing her main motivation in the coming season. However, killing Cersei in the Mountain is no small order, as Cersei is now the Queen of Westeros and the Mountain is an undead zombie killing machine. So these are by far the two hardest hits on her list. So I think Season 7 there will be a lot of struggle and adventure involved in Arya and King's Landing trying to find a way to pull this off, and she may inadvertently get dragged into some other storylines in the process. But before I attempt to tackle King's Landing, let's move down to Oldtown to revisit Samwell Tarly, who barely appeared in Season 6. So when he met with the clerk at the Citadel, he mentioned meeting with the Archmaester. Many assume this is referring to Maester Marwyn, and I believe that will be the case, or at the very least the show equivalent. This Maester might equally be interested in Daenerys, but obviously he's not going to go off to Meereen to chase after her. I believe he will involve Sam in some sort of plot, but I don't think it will be this great Maester conspiracy like there's one likely to be in the books. And it's probably something a bit more simplistic, but by the end of the season I think it will tie into the main plot somehow, and Sam will be out of Oldtown, probably headed back north. However, I do think that this is where we will see Jorah Mormont re-emerge, as he will go to Oldtown seeking a cure for grayscale and then somehow get involved in Sam's storyline. If Marwyn is indeed interested in Daenerys, he'd be very interested in talking to Jorah, and perhaps together with Sam they discover the key to defeating the White Walkers is the dragons, and Jorah's next quest will be to convince her that the White Walkers are the real threat. But that's just a wild stab in the dark. However, I do feel Jorah will go to Oldtown, as I doubt he'll just go to Karth or Shy or any place like that, because I think we're done with Essos in Season 7, and Season 7 will take place entirely in Westeros. So that leaves me to King's Landing in the whole South and Daenerys' storyline, including her allies such as Theon, Yara Greyjoy, Lady Olenna, and the Sand Snakes. So the reason I saved this to last is because these are the storylines that are the biggest mystery to me. I don't even know where Daenerys will land in Westeros first. I suppose Dorne is a likely option, although I suppose it's possible she could go straight to attacking King's Landing, but I somehow doubt it. It seems likely they might land somewhere first to recuperate, although I suppose it's possible that they could all go to Dragonstone and set up a base there. That is, after all, the ancestral home of the Targaryens and is rather close to King's Landing, and so a lot of people suggested that that may become her base. I'm just not sure. I do think she will send Tyrion to Winterfell to make an alliance because, as I said, he had prior dealings with Jon and Sansa, but in addition, at the moment, Daenerys has the allegiance of Dorne, the Reach, and the Iron Islands, sort of. Meaning the only major kingdoms not on her side are the Stormlands, the Westerlands, the Vale, and the North. And yeah, there's also the Riverlands, but they're kind of in chaos at the moment, so they can't help anyone. The Stormlands are non sequitur in the show since all the Baratheons died. I believe this will continue to go completely unmentioned, so let's just throw that out. And of course, the Westerlands are the Lannister stronghold, which means the only opposing kingdoms worth anything that Dany doesn't have on her side yet are the North and the Vale, which is why I think she's going to send Tyrion to Winterfell, where the Lords of the Vale currently are, to try to gain those last two alliances so Dany can have the Lannisters completely surrounded. Now, whether this happens before or after she attacks King's Landing, I'm not sure, and what specifically Dany will be up to in Season 7, I'm not sure. Again, this storyline is one of the biggest mysteries to me. As far as Cersei goes, I'm really, and I mean I really hope that we get to see on screen the moment that she's told that Daenerys has a huge force coming for her and her Hand of the Queen is Tyrion. I really want to see her face when she hears about Tyrion. I hope we're not robbed of this by this happening off screen. But what specifically Cersei will be up to, I'm not sure. In interviews, the showrunners warned not to count Cersei out yet, as the odds seemed incredibly stacked against her, but they say she may have a trick or two up her sleeve. At this stage, I think her biggest advantage is propaganda, and to turn the common folk against Daenerys, as she's bringing with her a foreign army of Unsullied, and more importantly, a bunch of Dothraki savages. And of course, the fact she chose Tyrion as her hand could be used to paint her as evil, because we saw through the play in Bravos what the public perception of Tyrion is. So I could imagine Cersei using a couple of dirty tricks like this to turn the common people against Daenerys, which would reek of irony, seeing as Cersei is the one who repeatedly gives no shits about the common people, where it's been Daenerys' goal to help them, but it would make for some really good storytelling. Other than that, I don't think we'll get too much of an extensive storyline with her and King's Landing, because there are hardly any characters in that storyline left alive. Obviously, we'll get some more tension between her and Jaime, which should play out very interestingly, and I'm frankly curious to see. As to the question of whether or not Cersei survives Season 7, that's a really, really tough one. I'd say at the very least, she loses her power by the end of Season 7, because I see no place for Queen Cersei in the final battle against the White Walkers, but whether or not she dies or takes on some other role, I'm not sure. And am I still predicting the destruction of King's Landing? Yes, I think Season 7 is likely to end with King's Landing being destroyed, and Daenerys is definitely not simply just going to take the Iron Throne and live happily ever after. I see her destiny being a lot more dark this season. And then, of course, there's Euron Greyjoy, who's still a wild card in all of this. As his goal was to make an alliance with Daenerys, but Yara and Theon beat him to it, and she now has vowed to take down Euron and overthrow his rule of the Iron Islands. So the big question is, what will he do in response? As apparently he's building the largest fleet known to Westeros with non-existent trees on the Iron Islands, but whatever. There's been speculation that he will ally with Cersei against Daenerys, and I suppose that's possible. I'm not convinced of that. There's also speculation that he will attack Daenerys' fleet before she even gets to Westeros. I highly doubt that will happen, but anything's possible. I do think that Euron is going to have a key part to play, although he will remain a somewhat minor character who barely appears. I do think he's going to somehow fuck up Daenerys' grand plans and be involved in destroying King's Landing somehow. How exactly, I'm not sure. So that's all I have at the moment. As I said, these are just really vague, bare bones guesses, and I would probably change drastically once the filming and production leagues start coming in. So sometime early next year, I will be doing a series of more detailed prediction videos for season 7 once we learn more about it, but I just wanted to throw out some of these vague predictions and my thoughts on it so far. So that's it for my Game of Thrones Season 7 vague predictions. Be sure to check back here every week as I try to put out at least one Game of Thrones video a week. However, I do have to announce that there will be no Game of Thrones video next week as I'm taking a week off to do 90s week, where I'll do a week of videos all about the 90s movies and TV shows, so that should be fun. But you can check back the following week for more Game of Thrones videos to come. I also do tons more videos on other shows such as Star Trek, Mr. Robot, Dark Matter, and more, so be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that. And thanks a lot for watching.